Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to my very own video on the war at home during World War I. Let's get right down to the point, just bare bone facts. Let's get started. Mobilized forces. Once America entered the war, they realized that to even oppose a threat to the Central Powers, they would need a bigger army. They tried posters to inspire people to help the war effort, but they still needed more troops. The United States of America came out with the Selective Service. The Selective Service basically drafted U.S. male citizens to join the United States Army, government, Air Force, etc. A lot of people were drafted into the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and rarely did anybody get drafted into a nice cozy desk job giving info, because the U.S. mostly needed troops on the ground and the air, because most people were fine with having a desk job. The U.S. expanded their army 5 times as big as how it was before the Selective Service Act. Also, some of the ads that were used to buy postcards or bonds to help the war effort for supplies that anybody with money could buy, even if it was just a few cents, it was a few cents closer to having another piece of food that the soldiers could eat, or bandages, or things that could help somebody save their life. National War Labor Board. Once times got rough for the U.S. in the war, Woodrow Wilson, our current president at that time, appointed the National War Labor Board. The National War Labor Board prevented striking and changed wages that would badly affect the war. What this means is that it was against the law to not work or go on strike. Basically, to pay your bills, you need to work longer, harder, for the same amount of money you got before the war started, and your taxes rose to help the war effort. Minority and women. This was the first time in American history that women were allowed to do anything with the war other than support. Women made uniforms, weapons, and equipment, but they did not fight. But in Poland, this is just I found this out. I can't remember where, but I have some research on it, or I did some research on it. I thought it'd be cool to share. There was an unmilitarized volunteers, like secret-ish group called the World War I Russian Battalion of Death. This was a secret volunteer group for women in Poland to fight on the front lines of the war. This is one of the main reasons some people call World War I the total war, not because like all the nations were involved, but that woman, even though it was unmilitarized or not legal, they still fought. Women still fought. But I just want to note that this was in Poland. So that happened in the USA. Therefore, it didn't have much relevance in here at all, but I thought it would be cool to share. The Great Migration. When you think of the word migrating, you'll probably think of the sea turtles and Finding Dory, or not. Well, yeah, I guess they technically are. Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, just moving through the little flow current thingy. Well, the Great Migration was probably one of the biggest immigrations in the world, basically, and it was within the own country. The Great Migration lasted until 1915 to the 1970s. The Great Migration had 6 million African Americans move from the south to the north or northwest or northeast, wherever. A lot of people saw wrong to call this the Great Migration, considering that the word migration is usually used for animals moving to another side of the ocean or a different area. Even though slavery was outlawed, there was still cruelty and unfairness in the South. The African Americans in the South saw that there would be more prosperity towards them and more job opportunities in the North, so they tried to move up north into the major cities, or up north in general. Resources and rationing. When World War I started, a lot of the farmhands either joined the U.S. Army, Navy, etc., or was drafted into the military, and as you probably guessed, it left the nations just a tad bit short on food supply. And when I say tad bit, I mean really low on food supply. When Germany, when Germany started unrestricting submarine warfare and sunk cargo ships, it worsened the shortages, food shortages in England especially. Wheat harvest was lower than ever in most places, and the price on certain items started to rise up. In 1917, the Women's Land Army was made and replaced the male farmers that left or got drafted to fight in the war. Many ads and propaganda encouraged the citizens to grow their own food because, um, you could probably get more wheat if you just grow it, and it'd probably take a little bit more time, but still, you wouldn't have to pay as much, and you get a little bit more bang for your buck. For most foods, especially bread, there were limits on how much you should use in a cake or loaf of bread. Here were some of the requirements. So bread including cakes, puddings, etc. You could only have it 4 pounds max. Meat including bacon, ham, sausages, gum, rabbits, poultry, and tinned meat, you could only have 2.5 pounds. Sugar, you could only have or 3/4 of a pound. And after that, although the wealthy were still fine when the food items rose up, they could still afford the expensive food, obviously. You could see the damage it did to the poor communities. The government introduced ration cards, which allowed you to buy food and supplies with stamps, mostly food. Yeah, I think it was only food though. At the store. Once you used that stamp, you couldn't use it for the rest of the month. Everyone had to register at their local butcher. Even when World War I ended, some of the items were still being rationed, but the longest one was butter. Butter was on the ration list for around 3 years after World War I ended, and had limits on what you could use. Now we're going to get on to Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, who was later going to become our president during 19 something to 1930 something. I think. I don't know. I don't know much about him. Other than when he was in the American Food Administration. The American Food Administration reminded and enforced people to make more food and eat less. They also sent much food to Europe because Europeans had it much worse than us. What we had over here was godsend compared to Europe. Propaganda, public support. George Creel. Every single nation published posters to the street that justified the war and encouraged people to help with the war effort. But the United States was only in the war for about like a year and a half. And we published much more of these propaganda posters than any other nation at all. From like the propaganda companies. In the U.S. propaganda. George Creel was head of the U.S. World War I propaganda. He also was a journalist around the war, or around when the war started, to investigate for Rocky Mountain News, 1911, to help break down what is happening in the war effort for the U.S. citizens. Socialism during the war. Socialists are people who find war unruly and wrong. During World War I, the socialists said that the war was only for capital interests, which means that money, territorial, stuff like that. The socialists gathered and stated that the only reason any of these nations are in the war is because of greed and to gain more power and land. Socialists stated that war brings death and destruction to the losers, and that it only helps the ruling nations that comes out victorious in the war. Pacifists in the war. Pacifists are people who find violence and war useless and barbaric. Before the war started in Europe, there were pre-peace movements to stop the nation from moving into war against Germany, and later followed America. Pacifists was running all throughout America, especially in Seattle. There was a big peace movement. 5,000 peaceful pacifists. Sorry about that. 5,000 peaceful pacifists going through the streets and parading and peacefully protesting that what the U.S. is doing is wrong. Soldiers came out and shut them up and told them to go away and that they can't be here or talk here anymore, and started to threaten and force them. Many newspapers came out that the U.S. took away their free speech. I'm not a pacifist or a socialist, but they should have been able to stay there and protest. It's free speech, First Amendment, easy. Now to our next topic: espionage, sabotage, sedition, acts in World War I. Remember that last section where, two seconds ago, where they kind of took away the free speech and freedom? Well, now they completely took it away. June 1917, Congress passed a temporary law that the citizens of the United States of America couldn't criticize or speak about the government, the uniform, the soldiers, and the flag. Many immigrants coming from different countries were upset and confused about why this was and thought that America's freedom and speech stuff was all garbage. You could basically say they just got hardcore bamboozled. Uh, they also outlawed spying, or made it was already outlawed, but um, heightened the punishments for spying. Although no one was caught for spying, 2,000 people were arrested for espionage. You could have gotten up to 20 years in jail for one of these causes. Uh, that's a lot of years. 2,000 people within like 3 years for the same thing. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's pretty big. And they rightfully were able to protest because it was wrong. Yeah, so I'm just gonna show you a couple songs and videos about the war. Hope you enjoyed my presentation. Yeah, have a good day. It's on YouTube. If you want to watch it again.